Joined now by his Deputy National Security Advisor for Strategic Communications, Ben Rhodes. Mr. Rhodes, thank you for joining us this morning. What is the latest intelligence you have? Does the president now agree with President Hollande that this was an act of war by ISIS?
Yes, George, first of all, in all likelihood, clearly all the signs point to this being the responsibility of ISIL. That's a determination that the French authorities have made. Certainly our information supports the strong likelihood that ISIL was involved in this. We absolutely agree that this was an act of war by ISIL. Anytime you have this type of indiscriminate targeting of innocent civilians, we see that as an act of war by a terrorist group. That's why, frankly, we've been waging war against ISIL now for over a year, with thousands of airstrikes and support for partners who are fighting them on the ground.
And is there any intelligence suggesting a specific and credible threat to the homeland? I know yesterday there was none. Has anything new developed there?
No, George. The president had a meeting yesterday that included the Secretary of the Homeland Security, the Director of the FBI. Our determination is there's not a specific credible threat to the homeland at this time, but we're going to be very vigilant because we know ISIL has the aspirations to attack the United States as well as our European and other allies and partners. So we're constantly going to be pulling threads on that intelligence, sharing information with our allies, and seeing if there are any aspirations that lead to plotting in the United States.
So this was an act of war against America's oldest ally, as the president pointed out the other day. How will the United States respond?
Well, first of all, we're clearly going to work very closely with the French in terms of intelligence sharing, also in terms of their military response inside of Syria. The French have been with us in Iraq and Syria in conducting airstrikes. I think we want to continue to intensify that coordination. There's a French two-star general who's positioned in CENTCOM to help facilitate that coordination. So we'll be working with the French to go after ISIL in response. We'll also be looking to intensify those things that we've seen bear some fruit in recent weeks, the types of leadership strikes that we've taken against the leader of ISIL in Libya, against Jihadi John in Syria, and the types of operations you saw in Sinjar, where our Kurdish allies on the ground were able to retake a strategic town from ISIL.
But are those decapitation strikes making any difference?
Well, George, it's going to take time. This is going to be a long-term effort. This is a deeply entrenched group. It's been in this part of the world for many years. It has its origins in al-Qaeda in Iraq. It morphed into ISIL. This threat is going to be with us for some time, but we have built an infrastructure of airstrikes, of the ability to train and equip forces on the ground, of intelligence that can lead to those types of leadership targets. And so our expectation is, as we continue to intensify those efforts, hope to draw in more resources from our coalition partners, we'll be able to roll back ISIL and ultimately achieve that objective of defeating the organization.
You know, the president received some criticism for that interview we did on Thursday, in the words he used, containment of ISIL. Carly Fiorina saying ISIL not contained, they are on the march. Chris Christie said the president is living in a fantasy. The president sees the world as he wants to see it. Your response?
Well, look, George, the president was responding very specifically to the geographic expansion of ISIL in Iraq and Syria. A year ago, we saw them on the march in both Iraq and Syria, taking more and more population centers. The fact is we have been able to stop that geographic advance and take back significant amounts of territory in both northern Iraq and northern Syria. At the same time, that does not diminish the fact that there is a threat posed by ISIL, not just in those countries, but in their aspirations to project power overseas. That's why we've been very focused on this challenge of foreign fighters coming into and out of Syria. Many of those have returned to Europe in particular. That's why it's such a focus of these meetings here, to talk about how we can seal that border with Turkey to prevent that flow of foreign fighters and share intelligence to disrupt and prevent attacks in our European allies, countries, and of course in the United States.
But now that we've seen probably 3 attacks by ISIL in just the last 2 weeks and the clear intent to go global, won't the president need to dramatically step up this strategy?
Well, we'll have to be nimble, George, and that means looking at ISIL's efforts to expand. It should be noted that we took that strike against the leader of ISIL in Libya precisely because we were concerned about their efforts to set up a stronghold in Libya, similar to what they've been able to do in Iraq and Syria. So we are going to be vigilant, and we're going to have a basic principle here that there cannot be a safe haven for a terrorist organization like ISIL that terrorizes the population around it and that seeks to project power and conduct attacks in the capitals of close friends and allies like France.
Ben Rhodes, thanks very much for your time this morning.